Welcome to One MOAR Take. We're back with the next series of One MOAR Take, and I'm really excited to be here. We're, really talking about something that's topical, really that's top of mind on how global enterprises are looking to enter the market. I think there's a lot of clutter around today that's happening, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Sarthak Brahma here. A leader that I've known over the last several years, and truly, I think I've learned a lot, Sarthak, in our conversations. And in many ways, you've had a unique vantage point, sitting on the other side. I think facilitating some of the largest enterprises out here, Fortune 500 companies, how they've kind of looked at entering the market. So really excited to have you on this talk series. So welcome, Sarthak.
Thank you so much, Mohit. Likewise, it's been a great journey knowing you from the other side and now partnering with you as well. And I'm just glad that it just panned out. I happened to be here for work, and here we are.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So,
sure.
Without any further ado, I just had a couple of questions top of mind. I think this was, I wanted to start at a macro, to start broad. In the last few years, in fact, if I look at last few months, I think things have been rapidly evolving, whether it's macroeconomics, supply chain, sourcing challenges. It's really got organizations to rethink in terms of what it means, what does global actually mean in the current context. So, behind all this change, I do think there's also a unique opportunity that lies here. From your vantage point, how do you feel like global enterprises are using this to reinvent how they're kind of looking at how business gets done globally?
Actually, it's interesting. If you ask me, are we living in a globalized world or are we beginning to live in a globalized world? Globalization, I think, was a thing up to a few months back until the change in administration, and everything has gone pretty global. So, and within that, now the thing that I'm noticing when we talk to enterprises and the decisions they are having to fend is, how do you balance amongst this changing landscape, geopolitical landscape, the supply chain disruptions, AI advent, and the most important one is capital tightening. So within that, how do organizations reshape their global segues? Who are they now partnering with, creating new corridors? How do they double down on digital leverage? And most importantly, how do they look at cost and efficiencies not as austerity programs, but to generate fuel for transformation, fuel for innovation? So cost mandates are no longer about, the classic save a penny here and there. No, it's about this is the way we need to move forward. And all the transformation is all about bootstrapped innovation. So that's where we are seeing the change.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I was reading, that you had posted from HEX was about the perspectives around the H1B, right? And I thought that was a great kind of article, great insights. Just your thoughts around how, especially US being a large market, and that's really where you are kind of positioned. How do you think that's creating opportunities for entities actually looking to get work done from global locations like India?
As enterprise, and more often when I'm talking to the CFOs, the executives, they also look at some of these executive orders and these changes that are happening not as something that they're hinging long-term strategies on. It has to be reactive because every day it's a new thing coming out.
Yeah.
So the long-term strategy cannot be hinged on these kind of sporadic events. Now, so therefore, when we are defining long-term strategies, the long-term strategies therefore are about how do you ensure that you are creating essentially talent at scale, a talent anywhere model. So to your point, right now, the main reason that enterprises are looking at India is purely because there's no other place like India when it comes to talent at scale, and more so now, digital talent at scale. But is that the right way to go and the only way to go? Time will tell, which is why we are creating a diversified or a multi-nodal technology and talent model as part of the broader strategy, which makes you resilient. So there is a plan B for a plan A, and that is the right way to go about it.
Yeah. And maybe just doubling down, since you spoke about it, yes, I think India in many ways has benefited from having talent at scale, like you rightly called out. But then there are some interesting emerging hubs that's also evolving around the world. Just your thoughts, your insights, in terms of how that's kind of playing out.
Sure. So, if you look at it right now, if I were to index on a geography which is emerging, is this entire Middle East. I think if you look at it, the way I see it is that if India brings digital talent at scale or can bring digital talent at scale, then Middle East offers the digital hubs or innovation hubs and transformation hubs. I think if you just look at the amount of golden visas, the residency programs, which were unheard of, and in the last 3 years now, almost 200,000 residency programs offered by Qatar, by Saudi, by UAE, all intended to drive the best of talent from Eastern Europe, from India, from rest of the world to create the next transformation hubs, innovation hubs in the Middle East. So I think I would over-index there. And other than that, I think from a GCC standpoint, purely from a nearshore corridor, I think Costa Rica is offering a great bet. I personally like that. And I as an advisor, but if you look at it again, very well-contained, this thing, very stable government, 2%, sub 2% inflation rates, very pro-expat, so a lot of US people can go 3-4 hours flying time from the south of US. So, and plus very proactive government initiatives to set up GCCs, to set up sourcing bases. So I think that would be my pick in the nearshore geography as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think it's not really a one size fits all. I think it's a multi-nodal.
Absolutely.
I think each location continues to have its unique advantage. And how we leverage it, I think, is critical for the enterprise.
Absolutely.
And talking about, I think as an advisor, really offering unbiased kind of opinions and views to organizations. I think one of the things, and I've seen that, Sarthak, close hand working, with you has been with the several organizations you have actually brought in. There's been one thing that the whole transition from delivery hubs to today, I think, more enterprises are looking at these GCCs. In fact, they're moving into more global innovation centers and innovation hubs of sorts. So your thoughts around that shift, and how is it that you're kind of influencing that thinking?
Yep. No, I think, which is exactly the way. See, the idea of, if you're just looking at India or any base for purely from a cost standpoint today, then obviously you're going about it the wrong way. We all know that. Enough has been said about it. So the question is, therefore, when we are looking at these, we are looking at, can we again provide self-funded innovation? And therefore, can GCC be a manifestation of self-funded innovation? So the moment that happens, everything that we are working with and the other thing is, I always say, even if you are running on a CIO or a CTO mandate and for a global capability center, always think of it as a FinOps. The moment there's a FinOps mentality, you are beginning to align business, finance, and IT as one stakeholder group and trying to get that buy-in. And so when you drive that self-funded innovation into a GIC, like you said, or a GCC hub, automatically there is a broader consensus from the enterprise. So I think, and that is the key driver for success. And many a times, if that consensus is not reached, because it is one person's personal utopia one is seeking through a GIC, it is more liable to fail than survive.
No, that's very interesting perspective. But just talking about that, I think one of the things also is from a single sponsor, whether it's the CIO, CTO, traditionally, that's what it tends to be. I think the key is to really drive institutional sponsorship. I think for enterprises today, where it's beyond the one kind of sponsor or leader who's driving the agenda. And I think very often that any shifts there, organization changes, I think has driven, the mandates for these GCCs very quickly. They pivoted into a very different direction, right? So,
absolutely.
So just your thoughts about how do, leaders sitting in these hubs build the confidence of global leaders when they're kind of navigating this ecosystem, and not necessarily just about, I think, India. I think this is about really how do people move away from a protectionist kind of a mentality to really thinking about what's the right thing. How do you think globally? And to your point, rather than locally in many ways, right? So just some insights around that, that'll be great.
Yeah, so I think when we are looking for certain success criteria, like even in this trip, finding that right person, right, who would lead and be the champion for innovation, it's critical. And so to me, I think it's partly technology, it's partly that fiduciary brain, partly administrative. But the one thing which I tend to, this subliminal thing that I tend to look for are storytellers. Because to me, a part of evangelizing the possibilities of a GIC or a GCC come from the fact that the person we are putting in as seat number one or employee number one, are they able to distill very commonsensically for organizations or parts of organizations, the enablers, can you bring them on?
Yeah.
And that is the narrative, that is the storytelling. Can you get people excited? So I think that is where many parent organizations just look at people from a technology lens. But there is no telling whether technology leader is actually a good storyteller and can create that emotion within the finance function, within the HR function. And therein lies a little bit of that missed opportunity. So when we are looking for that employee number one, I always say, let's look at it more holistically beyond just the technical chops or the chops we are looking at.
Yeah, no, I can't agree with you more. I think the ability to tell a story, and I think also for leaders to be inspirational, and because leaders have followers world over, and that's not a phenomenon in any part of the geography.
Correct.
And I think getting that employee number one right is extremely critical for these organizations.
Yeah. And actually, another thing on that, Mohith, and you might also agree with it, you have been in the practitioner seat as well. I have been an advisor only all throughout, but there is so much literature that pervades out there, like, location due diligence, talent availability models, cost and compensation. And so people over-index in those. But many a times I tell, if you can find that right person, then chances are that a successful ecosystem will be around that person. So if that person is in Bangalore or in Timbuktu or in Costa Rica, but that's the right person who can build that, then automatically you build it in the ecosystem that one person is capable of and is most comfortable in to scale up for you.
Yeah.
And so it's the other way, right? Do you wag the dog or do you wag the tail? So
very well said.
Yeah.
So, just switching gears a bit here, this is more in terms of the how. Right. Again, I think when you're sitting across the table with these CIOs, CFOs, one of the key questions is, what are the first few questions that they need to be asking themselves when they're opening these? I think you spoke about some great insights, I would say nuggets of wisdom around things like, for example, cost, talent play. But what is it that they should actually ask themselves when they're looking to enter a new market and build a capability?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is the clarity of why. Why are we doing this? It cannot be just because if I am a CIO and this is my pet project, or because this is my last hurrah and I want to, and nobody's going to give me a laurel for outsourcing $500 million transaction, but I can set up a center and this is my last pride and joy. Well, great. It could be your last pride and joy, but chances are it'll not be. I mean, it'll probably be the last one for the organization as well. It'll die its own death. So all I say is, I think the first thing is, why are you doing it? That journey of why then takes us to the next question on why is, the next question is what? And so what are we putting out there? And that means a scoping disposition. The issue many a times also, what the issue I see is that organizations which are not productized, containerized. So that means, when I say productized, it is IT and business coming together, right? So cloud and infrastructure could be a product, but say baggage claims could be a product, right? So, and that is when you productize it, you're bringing it all on one dashboard, and now you can take a disposition call on the ones which are called core IP, and therefore core talent, core products, core data. I want to monetize. That means I want to drive it into something I can call my own. Versus things wherein I want technology first. Human is only in the loop. That's where I want AI first, managed services, third party, augmented contracts. That is a disposition many a times which is not done as a homework. All I say is that ecosystems like India are so matured that it's very hard to fail once you get into the orchestration hoops, which is why over-index on the preparation, that why and what is important. And that is the disposition. If you have that, everything else will automatically take care of itself. That's what we are here for anyway. Right? So,
very well said. And, the other part is, having been involved in the, if I would say, design of several of these GCCs, GICs today, how would you kind of look at the first 12 to 18 months? Because I think that's a critical, inception is a very important part of how these organizations are built to scale.
Absolutely.
So your thoughts on what are good organizations, how have they done this differently?
Yeah, so, see, right now it's a hotbed, right, of activity. But you and I both know that not all organizations are being set up for success as we speak. Time will tell how many will sustain and how many don't. I think besides the things we talked about which set up one for success, the The other thing I would talk about is probably the operating model. The first 12 months is a lot more administrative, which is where you're trying to get the baby to stand on its own 2 feet, right? And so that's where the reporting structures and the operating structures and how the GCC's administrative internal reporting and the reporting to the functions out there in the US or UK is fundamentally different from once it starts becoming a steady state, which means now it becomes more product centric. So now your direct lines start, more umbilical cords are being created with the functional leads, the product managers, all of that. So that is the steady state and operating model from the year 2 onwards or year 3 onwards.
Yeah.
So many a times people just create one operating model and expect it to be utopia, and that's where they go wrong. I think there has to be a delineation between what is your year 1 operating model and then your steady state operating model. And that gears you up for success.
Very interesting.
And it also makes it very clear for, say, a supporting or enablement functions to see how are we required in first year and then how are we required in steady state.
Steady state.
Another final point on this. I know it for a fact, you cannot put a rock star in the seat in a GIC. We talked about the importance of that, that awesome employee number one. But if you put the best employee number 1 and you do not give them the enablement and the autonomy they require to operate, thanks to support functions, HR, procurement, localized procurement,
yes,
localized vendor management, all of these kind of things, even basic PR and branding to go into the local markets and hire.
Absolutely.
If you don't enable them, you could get all the rock star you want, but now you're just cutting them short.
Correct.
And that is again something a lot of organizations unfortunately do a lot of big faux pas in.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting perspective. I think the key aspect of that shift from an operator to make sure that that person is enabled and empowered to make decisions. I think sometimes you can miss the bus.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a recipe for disaster.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just kind of again, I'll just dwell a little bit on the leadership. You have worked with enterprise leaders through multiple transformations, right? Like whether it's sourcing strategies, shared services setups, digital transformation, and now I think you spoke about it a little later, AI-led change that's happening. So, what's that common thread you feel that defines these leaders who adapt well through this change?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the effective leaders are the ones who, this is a big change for any organization. Many a times, a lot of the folks who are trying to set up shop have never set foot in geographies like India and Costa Rica and Eastern Europe. Yeah. So it's a big change. So the leaders who expect that they will get 100% consensus and therefore the program will automatically happen, hell no, it's not going to happen. It's just a pipe dream, and a lot of times it'll fizzle out because you will not drive that consensus. On the other side, some of them think that we will bulldoze our way through.
Yeah.
And that also doesn't work because you will create more enemies and more change resistance than or not. So I think the good and effective leaders are the ones who are able to calibrate that balance between consensus and that cogency that is required, and balancing the two and recalibrating it as we go along the process. And in the process, trusting, if you are bringing on an advisor, if you're bringing on practitioners, it's very important to then trust them for what you're bringing. If you have to do what you anyways want to do and you want a rubber stamping, I'm sure there are a lot of advisors who will do that for you. Well, then good luck to you.
Yeah.
But I think that is where you need to be trusting, you need to be cogent, and you need to also be a consensus-driven leader to make it all work out. And I think that's the secret recipe.
So interesting, yeah. And as you say that, I think the role of a trusted, unbiased advisor, I think through all this at different life stages of the organization, whether it's inception to even, I would say the next 12 to 24 months, and then what I would say the phase of growth and maturity. I think the role of the advisor is critical. But then just coming back to leadership, I thought that was an interesting one you said, because we've seen some great examples. I think you and I were talking about it just a few days ago about like the chief AI officer sitting out of like Hyderabad, or a CIO sitting from Bangalore. I think very interesting trends are emerging of global leadership. But in your opinion, what's that one trait that differentiates these examples of leaders who are playing these global roles? Just any insights or wisdom on that?
I think you mean the ones which are getting localized here within the GCCs. I think that's what like I said earlier, I think over-indexation on technology, or even that, like we were discussing, with the large fast food chain localizing their AI presence here. and the chief AI officer. I don't think the chief AI officer is the one who needs to be this geek in vibe coding and in prompt engineering. Yes, that's required, but is that the key to that person's success? Hell no. The idea is, if I am that chief AI officer sitting here in India, how cued am I about the business requisites, about indexing AI into business functions, front office functions, where the issues are. Just yesterday, I was speaking with the India GCC lead of travel, transportation, hospitality client. We were having, drinks together. And there are certain times many great ideas which have not taken root because they slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
So GCCs could be great ideas and places for these sandboxing because nobody has picked up that idea and run it through. And therein, you can drive transformation which the rest of the organization has not even bothered to figure because everybody's fighting their own daily fires.
Yeah.
When you do that, you automatically build trust, you're picking up things which nobody had noticed, and now you're creating successes. And therein lies, I think, the success of the localized people to start building that resonance with the parent. Yeah.
As you see some of these shifts that's happening, I think the speed of change has been now rapid. Now, if I have to kind of draw this, if you were to paint a picture 2 to 3 years down the line, any trends, big shifts that you see, that how enterprises are going to operate in this, let's say, global environment that you kind of alluded to earlier?
Yeah.
Your thoughts around that?
I think geographies, economies, people in general are like water. They will find a way. You try to stop one thing, they will go around. It's like, so my thing is, we live in an age wherein democracies have turned on themselves and they were the largest coalition and the world benefited. And now I think as democracies are turning on themselves, new emerging geographies we spoke about are propping up to take advantage of the fact. And so therefore what it means for enterprises are optionality, which is that plan A, plan B I keep. So whenever we are talking, whether it's a vendor portfolio or whether we are talking about a product incubation, whether we are talking about a talent disposition, I always believe that keep things multinodal, always have that resiliency in your program, because resiliency to me so essentially in this entire race for speed and scale and creating new geographic dispositions, the key thing which I believe can suddenly go away is the resiliency if you over-index on any one location, one model, one geography, one vendor. So I think there is a need to always have that optionality.
Interesting. Yeah. That's just one final question, Sarthak.
Sure.
As you kind of have seen some of this change, I think if there's one piece of advice you would want to give leaders in general, anything that you would feel that here is something to keep in mind when you're kind of working for an organization, whether at the head office, home office, or sitting in a location like this. If there's one piece of advice you would want to give leaders to start thinking about as they go through this change.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's very important to be a bridge between functions, between departments, between these walls which are within. So can you become a bridge, but at the same time, and becoming that bridge and always looking at things from the other person's perspective. I always say that bring on the naysayers first. Bring on the apprehensive parties first, right? The reluctant folks first. Hearing them out instead of shutting them down always creates more segues for possibilities. Not only that, many a times they may have a valid point which we are not willing to, or we are naive enough in our own call it ego or call it our own vision and whatever we want to plow forward. We sometimes marginalize, but maybe there are valid points, and maybe listening to them and then building the bridge with them starts giving you those optionalities that I spoke about, which we haven't thought about. And then the second thing is, while you're doing that, be the bridge, but also sometimes you need to be the wall. Right? And the wall is when there is unnecessary political backlash coming your way, or, and so you need to protect the people who are now joining your cohort. So how do you become a wall as a leader to take on the brickbats and face that? and protect them and shield them. But when the time comes, you become the bridge and let them get the accolades, give them the the opportunities, let them shine, all of that. And so I think it's just both that, be the bridge and be the wall as the time dictates. So,
this is fantastic. I think really I feel like as we think about the last few minutes that we've been together, Sarthak, I think one thing that hasn't changed, knowing you all these years, is it's always straight talk. There is never a moment that I get any filtered version of Sarthak, right? So it's always Sarthak in its true sense, and I think that's what makes an advisor, in a true sense, a trusted partner. That it's unfiltered and it's straight talk that goes out there. I love those perspectives. I think about really multinodal storytelling for leaders. I think just looking at don't look at, think beyond the walls. I love I think the analogies you kind of shared. But thanks for spending these moments. I know you have a flight to catch in some time, but really appreciate you spending this time. I've enjoyed talking to you, Sarthak, and folks, thank you for watching. I thought this was a special one with Sarthak Brahma, and look forward to the next One More Take, and keep watching. Thank you.